When Clay asked me if I would preach today, he said he wanted me to continue and to conclude this brief series of sermons we've had in January on foundational values for life. The idea of starting out the new year by looking at what's most important in life, things that really matter. And when he told me that, I thought to myself, this is kind of like going back to the beginning when I started in the ministry. When I was a young preacher, the older members of the church, many of whom were that wonderful builder generation, as we call it, they loved to have Sunday school lessons or sermons or talks in CWF on the subject that if this were the last talk I was ever going to give, what would I say? Kind of a challenge. So that's what I want to do this morning, is share with you, which fits right into the foundation of values of life, that if this were the last talk I were ever going to give, these would certainly be some of the things that I would want to say. What would you say, I wonder, if you were up here with that kind of a challenge? It reminds me of one of my favorite stories about the man that went to the doctor for a checkup. And after he had his checkup, he was talking with the doctor, and he said, "Hey, doc, am I going to live to be 100? And the doctor said, "Well, do you drink?" And the man said, "No." He said, "Do you smoke?" The man said, "No." "Do you chase women?" The man said, "No." He said, "Well, if you don't drink or smoke or chase women, why do you want to live to be 100? The challenging question is, why do you want to live at all? What is it that makes life wonderful? What is most important in life? And are you experiencing it every day? In our scripture lesson this morning from one of my favorite passages, John 10:10, Jesus says, "I have come that you might have life and have it in all its fullness." In other words, Jesus doesn't want us to just exist in this world, to go around, breathing and eating food and so forth, but he wants us to really live and live life to the fullest. He doesn't want us to be like the man who died and they put on his tombstone. He wanted it on his tombstone. It said, born in 1950, died in 2010, lived 20 years. Do you get it? You're free to laugh. It's okay. Or he doesn't want us to be like the little girl that was asked to bring her birth certificate to school, and on the way to school she lost it. When she got to the classroom, she was crying, and the teacher said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I've lost my excuse for being born." And I wonder how many adults have lost their excuse for being born. Could you be one of them? We live in an age where there's more and more emphasis, to put it mildly, on things like abortion, with all the marches that we've had lately, with questions about Dr. Kevorkian or assisted transition from this world to the next. And in light of that, people are always, talking about, when does life begin, when does it end? And people have always asked, is there life after death? But I've always felt that a more important question for us right now is there life before death? Are you going to live before you die? And if so, what does that take? What's involved in that? What are the foundational values for a life lived to the fullest? And that's what I want to talk about this morning. It certainly gives me the opportunity to touch on some of my favorite themes that I never get tired of teaching or preaching about. But again, I say, if you were up here, what would you say? These are 4 things. I could do more, but I'm only going to do 4, that I think are so very important for finding life before death. And the first one of these is what we call enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. I always like to say, are you one of those persons who gets up in the morning and jumps out of bed and says, "Good morning, Lord"? Or are you one of those who drags yourself out of bed and goes, "Good Lord, morning"? Are you one of those persons that's always looking for what's positive and good and excited about life and excited about everybody around you? Or are you one of those who's kind of negative and gloomy and always finds what's wrong and what you can complain about? I mean, not only which kind of person are you, but which kind of person do you like to be around the most? And if you're one of the second kinds, the more negative kind, then ask yourself, no wonder I don't have any friends if you're always negative. But the difference between the two is what we call enthusiasm. And if you break that word enthusiasm down into its parts, you have on and theos, which means in God, or better yet, God in you. And people who are in touch with the Spirit and the power of God, who have that Spirit and power of God in their lives on a daily basis. In other words, people who don't just know about God, but they know God. People who don't just know about Jesus Christ, but they know Jesus Christ. They have that personal relationship that we're always talking about. They're the ones who are the most exciting, interesting, and full of life people that we love to be around. People that don't connect with the power of the Spirit of God are the ones that can tend to be dull, negative, and always complaining. I'll give you an example to think about, but how many times have you been on a vacation? Maybe it's some nice resort, maybe some fancy hotel in the summertime, and if you're like me, I'm a people watcher. I like to watch people and observe what I see, and I always see some people, some families that are just having a great time. The kids are happy playing, the parents are happy, they're having a wonderful vacation, but then there are those other families you see where the kids are always fussing and crying, and I'm boring, and I don't like this, and the parents are not far different, complaining about the hotel service, complaining about the food, complaining about. So again, I say, which kind of person do you want to be around? The kind that are full of enthusiastic, or the kind that are kind of bored and negative? Even Billy Graham, of all people, once said, America is said to have the highest per capita boredom of any spot on earth. We know that because we have the greatest variety and the greatest number of artificial amusements of any country. People have become so empty, he said, that they can't even entertain themselves. They have to pay other people to amuse them, to make them laugh, to try and make them feel warm and happy, comfortable for a few minutes, to try and lose that awful, frightening, hollow feeling, that terrible, dreaded feeling of being lost and alone. Was he talking about you? Is your life full of enthusiasm? And if you don't have it, do you know how to get it or where to get it? Thomas Edison once said, when a person dies, if he or she can pass along enthusiasm to their children, they will have left them in a state of incalculable value. Or what Ralph Waldo Emerson said, nothing great was ever achieved in this world without enthusiasm. And that's so true. But you can succeed at almost anything, including life itself, for which you have unlimited enthusiasm. And remember, on and theos. Enthusiasm comes from God and having the Spirit and power of God in your life. The second value that I would lift up that's foundational for life, if you want to live before you die, if you want to live life to the fullest, is to realize that it's people, not things, that matter the most. Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. In other words, he's telling us we are supposed to love people and use things. But so many people in this world have it backwards. They love things and they use people. And eventually they become disillusioned with materialism and self-indulgence. They realize something's missing and that there's a hole in their soul that nothing can quite fill. What good does it do to have a big bank account or luxurious material possessions if you have no family or friends that you can share it with? I still remember when I read about Aristotle Onassis. Remember, he married Jackie Kennedy. He was a very wealthy Greek shipping tycoon. And when he died, one of his buddies, who was also a wealthy shipping tycoon, said of his friend Onassis, he said, he climbed to the top of his tree and he found there was nothing there. How sad that is. It's people, not things, that matter most. And if you had been here in this sanctuary yesterday, where it was totally packed with people expressing love, and a huge family expressing that it's people, it's family. They were here for that memorial service with the 3 boys and the parents who died in Gatlinburg. The outpouring of love, and again, people talked and expressed how it's people, it's relationships that's so important in life. Some other Sunday would be a good topic of discussion, or in a small group if you have, talk about what does it mean to be a true friend, and how do you go about being a friend to somebody else. One of the greatest hopes that I see in the younger generation is that they seem to be more interested in relationships than they are in things. At least that's the way I've seen so many of them in this church and other places, and that gives me great excitement and hope about their future. The third secret to meaning and purpose in life, if you want to live before you die, is doing things for other people and not just for yourself. I've always loved the saying that there's no smaller package than somebody all wrapped up in himself. And Jesus, when he was asked about what it means to be great in life, Jesus clearly said, the greatest among you will be the servant of everybody else. He not only said that, but he lived it. That's a real challenge for our self-centered, self-serving, what's in it for me world of today. An unknown poet once wrote these words, there are a number of us who creep into this world to eat and sleep and know no reason why they're born, but merely to consume the corn, devour the cattle, the fowl, and fish, and leave behind an empty dish. Could that be said about you? What are you doing right now in your life for the sake of others? I love the way another person expressed it even 2 centuries ago when he said, I shall pass through this world but once. Therefore, any kindness I can show or any good thing I can do for any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer it nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. All of us who have that attitude in life know what Jesus meant about life in all its fullness. And there's a book that Clay's mentioned. He gave it to me for Christmas, and I love it. If you don't have it, get it. We can't keep it in the bookstore. It keeps selling out, but we'll get more. It's called The Book of Joy, and one of my men's group is reading it and discussing it. But it's a dialogue between the Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa and the Dalai Lama of Tibet. They're both in their 80s. They're both talking about life and how do you find joy and meaning in life, and why is it so many people don't find it? What keeps us from finding joy in life? And one of the basic themes that runs through that entire book on every subject they talk about is simply the question of whether you're just focused on yourself or whether you're focused on others. A number of years ago, the people in France decided they would take a vote to see who the French people considered to be the greatest Frenchman who ever lived. Who do you think that they voted? It was not Napoleon, who won so many victories for France and conquered so much of the world. But who they decided was the greatest Frenchman who ever lived was Louis Pasteur, the father of modern medicine, who gave his life in love and service to humankind. Yes, to know that even one other person's life is better because you've lived would be to succeed with this world. I want to share with you another story that's a favorite of mine. And as I talk about this person in the story, I want you to be thinking about people here at Woodmont, maybe some right here in the sanctuary right now, who would fit into this same category. But it's a story about a man who really knew the secret to life's joy and life's meaning. His name was Basil Oliver, and he lived at the YMCA in the middle of London. And probably nobody outside of the YMCA even knew Basil Oliver, but those inside who worked there, who went there, who lived there, they knew him well. He died when he was 85 years old, and although most people had never heard of him, he knew what life was all about. Many years before, his wife had died, and so he went to London to live there at the Y. And for more than 30 years, he lived there and no place else. He became so useful around the place that nobody really realized how much he did for others. He brought in the mail every day. He went, if someone needed stamps, he'd go and buy them at the post office. He'd run any kind of errand anybody else needed. He did all kinds of odd jobs. He was the one that brought the Sunday newspapers into the lounge for reading every week. It was Basil who presided over the tea and the coffee in the lounge on Sunday morning afternoons. You could not spend any time at the Y without seeing him, cheerful, smiling, padding around in his rubber-soled canvas shoes he always wore, without an overcoat, even in the winter, always stepping about quickly, kindly, ready to help anyone, and just breathing goodwill. It was only after Basil died suddenly that people truly realized all that he did. For years, he did good without ever seeking recognition or reward. He did it only for the joy of serving others. He was a supremely happy man, a supremely useful man, a supremely kind man who knew the reason for which he was born. Now, I know you're probably thinking about some members of Woodmont that would fit the category of a Basil Oliver. But how about you? Is there any degree of Basil Oliver in you, in your heart? Finally, we come to the fourth and last foundational value for life. If we talk about why are we here and what is it that helps us live life to the fullest, and that's simply that one powerful, great word called love, particularly agape love, as the Greek used it in the New Testament. Love is the ultimate foundation of value of life. If I ever find myself thinking, well, now at this point in my life, why am I here? The number one question I can only come up with is love. Love for other people, serving other people, caring for them. Yes, my family, yes, members of the church, but also people I don't even know. Love is the joy of life. Love is the source of comfort and security and strength. When all is said and done, only love really matters. Or as the Bible puts it in 1 Corinthians 13, if I have not love, I am nothing. If I have not love, I have nothing. In that day like ours, when we see demonstrations about abortion and discussions about Kevorkian-type assisted transitions in life, people say, when does life begin? When does life end? For me, I've always said that life begins when you are loved and when you can love in return. And life ends when you no longer can love or be loved. You may still be breathing and walking around, but you're not really living. Your body may be still going, but your love has stopped. You can also be loved even after your body stops breathing and living, when your body dies, because love never ends. And you know that. If you've truly loved people that are no longer in this world, that love is still very real. When God created us, God created one person, and God thought, it's not good for just one person to be alone. So God created a second person, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth, and we're all here because it's not good for anybody to be alone. Love is the glue that holds all of life together. And without love, I don't think any of us would really want to live, even if we had everything else there was in the world. So do you know how to truly love another person? Do you know how to truly let somebody else love you? It's love that's the bottom line in life. And so these are my answers to the question, why are we here? What are the foundational values in life? What's life all about? What does it take to live life to the fullest? Enthusiasm, people, not things, service to others, and love. And in light of those four values, I want to leave you with one question. Will you live before you die?